Welcome back to Golden Rule Radio, a weekly summation of the precious metals markets. Each week we focus on what's happening in the markets related to the metals, as well as the news that moves those markets, and we do so in order to prepare and protect families from uncertain times. And we've been doing this since 1972. Today is May 3rd, 2017. So jumping right into the metals, big news today is probably the Federal Reserve minutes coming out of their FOMC meeting. Miles, how's that going to move the price?
Well, I'd argue by saying big news is relative since they're not even broadcasting today's announcement, so I don't really think anybody's expecting any changes.
So you think, Miles, then any price movement we see from here is going to have nothing to do with the Federal Reserve?
Yeah, I think we're looking more technical price moves, possibly geopolitical with some of the North Korea, China announcements that we're going to talk about later in the show, as well as the European elections that we talked about last week. So we put up some potential support levels in last week's show. We did blow right through those. So now the question is, where do we see the bottom? We were talking before the show, just looking at a couple charts, and I think at least a few of us are agreeing somewhere in the 1200 to 1205 range before we see a massive stopping point.
Those potential support levels that we put up last week were short term, and I think we could run all the way down to that previous low of 1200, 1205 range.
Yeah, and I don't think we necessarily blew through them. I mean, we saw a 3-day pause at 1263, 1265, and so it tried and failed, that's all. What about silver then?
Silver's come down hard, $2 in the last 2.5 weeks of trading. Platinum has followed it down to the 900 level, so they're really taking it on the chin, but looking like a good opportunity.
And it's increased the gold-silver ratio to 75-1, which honestly was catching me by surprise. Again, puts that much more pressure on stepping into silver, as long as you have the stomach for the volatility.
And you should. Why? Because silver has outperformed gold on the way up. When metals prices rise, last time silver rose 5 or 6-fold, with gold rising 1.5-fold.
So this will actually transition well into, let's talk about the Federal Reserve a little bit more. Let's not leave the FOMC. So yeah, no press conference today, Miles, to your point. They're going to basically have a policy statement, no expected rate rise, but there's still, a 65 to 70% chance of a rate hike in June. We spoke 2 weeks ago about the sentiment change from inflation to more of a short-term deflation. But that doesn't mean that it's a long-term deflationary cycle. It just means we're going to see this pullback as we talked about. So what does June bring in terms of silver turning right around?
I think we're seeing that change in the markets this week, like what we were talking about last week with that change in inflation expectation, right?
I think that's why there's no rate hike. I mean, you had the manufacturing numbers come out that were down pretty substantially. Consumer spending was flat. Incomes are up just a little bit, but that manufacturing drop from 57 to 54.8, it still indicates growth, but slowing growth. And when you look at that in relation to the inflation rate dropping from 2 to 1.8%, that doesn't mean next month it can't go right back to 2. We're still, with Trump's policies and the expected spending, we're still looking at a 2017 inflationary rate that will exceed 2%.
So I guess the question then stands, do we still have support in that mid-16 level, or are we looking at lower prices in silver?
I think
what is
that
support? Yeah, what is it, Robert?
We do. And I think it's probably right around where we are. I think silver's hitting a fib level right now.
That's right.
1645.
Well, and the way the higher highs have been building to see these types of corrections for anybody that does any trading, it shouldn't throw you off your game at all. I mean, this isn't out of the ordinary for day-to-day, week-to-week moves in any asset class.
Are you buying here or are you waiting?
If we stay above these fib correction levels, then I'm going to look back a week or two from now and wish I had bought with where the ratio is and with where the price is. I mean, this is our third touch into a level, and each time we've touched it, we've gone higher. However, if it goes below, yeah, I may hold off for a week or two before I look for a good entry point.
Miles, I think you are talking about the short term with the chart, and long term, I'm a buyer. Anywhere in the two digits with silver, it's going to 100 or more. I don't know in what time frame, but I'm buying.
A lot of times we'll focus on, adding to ounces at a little bit of a discount. We had a great talk this morning with Don McAlvany, our founder and chairman of this company, who started ICA back in 1972 when you weren't even allowed to be buying and selling gold bullion. And he's sitting there reminding us, look, I mean, the fact that you've got this global push towards cashless societies, the globalist establishment is really pressing forward very, very aggressively since the Trump election. And nothing's really, has changed in that regard. And you need to get gold and silver in your portfolio.
There are more reasons today to own gold and silver outside the financial system than there ever have been.
Yeah, to Don's point, I mean, the Trump election scared the globalists, and now they're on a full frontal attack, right? It woke them up, and the conservatives need to make sure, the contrarians, that they don't fall asleep in this type of a situation.
I'd also say that in this office, a number of us do have a concern that we've seen pop up over the last 45 years. The idea that when we have a non-globalist, austerity-focused, financially independent entrepreneur, somebody coming against the establishment, we tend to get lackadaisical in the assumption that we've won the war when it may just be one small battle. And I think we're seeing that with Theresa May and Brexit right now. We're seeing that with French elections, and we're certainly seeing that at home. This is no longer a left versus right issue.
Well, and I don't think, Miles, that it ever really was. This is a more libertarian-minded, individual protection and privacy-minded issue, right? So it's an anti-establishment versus establishment issue. It's a globalist versus more austerity or independent-driven approach. And the precious metals really represent that it doesn't have to be right versus left. There's amazing similarities in the frustrations of, say, the Occupy Wall Street movement and the far-right anti-Federal Reserve movement. They just don't have their eyes on the same target. So really, you need to understand what gold does for you and your portfolio in terms of that long-term asset preservation and getting assets out of the paper-driven, establishment, globalist-driven agenda.
Doing that helps you safeguard what you've worked your entire life for. Listen, I have clients, you guys probably have clients, our company has clients who, from a political standpoint, may be completely at odds with each other. But from a monetary standpoint, they want security, they want safety, they want something that is going to be tangible, transportable. What else?
Private and proven.
The risks in the financial system have never been greater.
Well, and that's why I've been saying that if you don't own physical precious metals ounces, you're crazy.
These price pullbacks, these declines are a gift. Take advantage of it.
All right, we'll get off the soapbox. That was all one big, long recommendation, so count that as the weekly recommendation. But before we leave, geopolitically, I mean, we can't ignore it. Miles, bring us around.
So all eyes remain on North Korea, both from here in the U.S., Europe, as well as closer neighbors like China. There have been some rumors circulating around Chinese social media, Facebook, or whatever their version of Facebook is, that Chinese government has issued a last warning to North Korea over nuclear weapons. Obviously, last week or the week before, we talked about us moving some warships over into the area. China's been stockpiling some troops along the border. So we may be seeing potentially some conflict, or at least the threat of conflict, which adds to the uncertainty we just talked about.
Thank you for listening this week. Call us and we will help you develop a dynamic, long-term precious metals portfolio and strategy.
Follow us too on Twitter at ICA Gold, and subscribe to us by clicking the subscribe button below this video. But again, as Robert said, give us a call and we'd be happy to run through things with you. Tune in next week.